We're going to start today with something that I know some in my audience don't really want to accept. But when we deny an empirical reality, we're really all the worse off. There's no advantage to denying an empirical reality. And the empirical reality is that Joe Biden's approval rating is not good. And it's actually getting down to where Donald Trump was at this point in his presidency. And we're going to talk about why. We'll talk about the implications and we'll talk about what could be done to reverse it. But it is now very clear that Joe Biden has a political problem on his hands. And as a result, Democrats have a political problem on their hands. In terms of the numbers, Joe Biden's approval has dropped below 40% for the first time in his presidency, according to the RealClearPolitics average of polls. Now, what RealClearPolitics does is it takes a number of different polls individually, some of which might have a bias. Like, for example, it includes the Rasmussen poll, which can have sort of a right-wing bias. It includes the IBD tip poll, which some say has a bit of a left-wing bias, et cetera. And you get an average. And yesterday, that average dropped for the first time below 40 to 39.8. And today has recovered just a sliver to exactly 40. And as you can see, if you're watching, that's the lowest that it has been since the start of Joe Biden's presidency. And if we ask the question, well, it's common that sometimes presidents come into office with a higher approval and then it sort of declines over time. How does it compare to past presidents? And 538 does that for us. And what you see when you look is that Joe Biden came into office with a significantly higher approval than Donald Trump, about 10 points higher. And that has slowly gone down to where they are now almost identical. At this point in their presidencies, Biden and Trump are now basically equal in terms of approval. Joe Biden's approval is well below where Barack Obama's was at this point in his presidency. It, because of 9/11, is dramatically below where George W. Bush's was, although George W. Bush did ultimately squander the high approval that came in the aftermath of 9/11. Joe Biden's approval, although for a period of time was higher than Bill Clinton's at this point in his presidency, it has now dropped below. Biden's approval is well below where George H.W. Bush's was. It is below where Ronald Reagan's was. And if we want to go back further, it is also below where Jimmy Carter's was. Similar to Gerald Ford, well below Richard Nixon. And, you know, we could go back further and it's a different era. If you go back to LBJ, Kennedy and Eisenhower, it's a completely different political era altogether. I don't know how much we get from looking at those numbers. But the point here is Joe Biden does have a political problem on his hands. Now, why is Joe Biden's approval so low? It's a combination of things. First and foremost, it has been some time since Joe Biden has had what we might consider a major accomplishment. Relatively early on, Joe Biden had the COVID stimulus package. Shortly after that, there was the dramatic rollout of the accelerated rollout of COVID vaccines. But then Joe Biden got hit with the Delta variant. Then Joe Biden left Afghanistan, which I believe is 110% the right decision. But the right was able to weaponize it pretty successfully in terms of saying it was chaotic and misplanned. And it said all the things that it would have been under Trump as well. But that hurt Joe Biden. Infrastructure was done, but it got relatively little coverage. And then now there's sort of this lull. And so I think there's a couple different questions that we could ask. One, in a vacuum, what could Joe Biden do to raise his approval in the short term? I did a TikTok clip about this by popular demand. And there's a few different things that Joe Biden could do in the short term, although I don't know how much they would benefit him long term. You know, we've talked about the student loan forgiveness. There is no doubt that doing some student loan forgiveness would help Joe Biden's approval rating in the immediate. But would it really help him, and would it help Democrats longer term? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. Something on decriminalizing marijuana federally, I think, would be very popular. But could he get it done is a sort of a real question. What about announcing that the pandemic is over? And this question, which just 3 days ago was sort of like, yeah, maybe, it is very clear that due to political pressure and, quite frankly, fatigue with the pandemic, numerous states are now saying we're getting rid of masks. We're getting rid of masks in schools. We're getting rid of, in some cases, requirements for vaccination to go to certain types of businesses. And my expectation is that for political reasons, between now and March 1st, which is the date of the next State of the Union that Joe Biden is going to give, I expect it could be next week. It could be on the day of the State of the Union. Sometime between now and March 1st, I expect the Biden White House to come out and say, we are now at the point where life can really start going back to normal. Now, there's divergent views, as I talked to you about yesterday, as to whether that is a scientifically and medically sound thing to do. Some say there's really no more milestones to wait for. If we don't get a more deadly variant, it's sort of going to be like this for the next however many years. There's really nothing else to wait for. It's time to go back to, quote, normal and let people make decisions for themselves about their level of risk. The counterpoint to that is, there's still a lot of people dying as a result of the surge that started a couple months ago. It is not the time to do it. I think that there is significant leaning right now within the Biden White House to sometime between now and March 1st, take a sort of mission accomplished approach, make a mission accomplished type statement when it comes to COVID. Whether it will end up being the right thing or not, I don't know. But Joe Biden does have a political problem on his hands. And these are some of the things, certainly, that when it comes to COVID are being considered. And very quickly, because we're basically 8.5 months from the midterms, what happens in the next 6 weeks is going to set the tone for what the midterm races are going to look like in terms of what Republicans will use to run against Democrats. The culture stuff, for sure. But what else are they going to use? And there's this limited window now to set the tone for that, for what that's going to be. And of course, we'll be following what it is. It is a brand new year. Maybe you have goals around getting in better shape, maybe cutting back on sugar. That's why you should check out our longtime sponsor, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon tastes exactly like the delicious sweet breakfast cereals you loved as a kid, but Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net carbs. So it's perfect if you're doing low carb or keto, or if, like me, you just try to limit your sugar intake. You can build your own variety pack with flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cinnamon, cookies and cream, waffle, maple, blueberry. That's my favorite. Magic Spoon lets you enjoy a sweet, delicious snack without the guilt. You can stick to your goals and still treat yourself. And if you don't love Magic Spoon as much as I do, they'll give you all of your money back, no questions asked. Magic Spoon is giving my audience $5 off when you go to magicspoon.com/Pacman and use the promo code Pacman.